Welcome to Shadow Shorts. This is where every weekday at noon Eastern, I bring to you a conversation with an expert, a thought leader, a doer in the realm of innovation for the built environment. My name is Jeff Echols. I am a senior advisor and the head of marketing for Shadow Partners. And today I am joined by Hamid Alemohammad. He is a co-founder and chief operating officer at Brickeye. And I also want to say that he is one of the mentors in our incubator program, the Shadow Partners incubator program that we have going on. And I'm gonna gush on him and some of the other mentors as well. Without these mentors and advisors that we bring into the incubator ecosystem, we could not make that happen. So, first of all, Hamid, thank you for being a mentor, and second of all, thanks for joining me for this conversation today.
Thanks, Jeff. My pleasure to be a part of the ecosystem and help Shadow venture in the incubator program.
Yeah, it's like I said. I mean, I can't say enough. It's great to have people like you that are much further down the road than our startups that are in the incubator, but to come in and share your experience, share your knowledge, share your wisdom. That's a big help for all the startup founders that are involved in the incubator right now. Um, I know at one point you were in their shoes, right? You were starting out. You and your co-founder were starting out and getting ready to launch. And what you focus on at Brickeye is risk mitigation using IoT, which I think is fascinating. We were talking before we went live that in my pro practice class a couple of weeks ago, risk management, risk mitigation was the topic of the week for class. And so give us a little bit of background around why you decided to attack risk mitigation and then where you've gone from there.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, if you don't mind, I'll give you a very brief background of Brickeye and how we started and how we um, got into the risk mitigation using IoT. I mean, as you mentioned, at Brickeye, we harness the power of IoT or Internet of Things, and to help and empower general contractors, owners, developers, and insurance providers to effectively mitigate risk, boost productivity, and safeguard margins in both infrastructure construction projects as well as high-rise building construction projects. And we do that through collection of data from sensors that are placed in construction projects and using other types of data that we collect from other sources. And we generate insights for the project owners, for project managers, and all the stakeholders in the projects in order to help them to reduce the risk in the projects. And different types of risk, I can name some of them. Water, as we all know in the construction projects, water is the biggest risk, and it's a leading source of builders' risk and wrap-up liability in policy, the insurance policy. In addition to that, we do monitoring of foundations, mostly concrete foundations, during the course of a curing of the foundations and concrete pours, as well as environmental monitoring. Things like air quality, environmental conditions, gases, toxic gases, and also noise emission from buildings, especially in urban areas and that are exposed to a lot of regulations and restrictions with respect to the amount of noise that it can generate. The Brickeye, I mean, we were known as AOMS Technologies until 2 years ago. The company was founded by me and two of my co-founders. We all graduated from university, and our research project was on ruggedized sensors. So that was basically what we used to do, and ruggedized sensors for harsh environments. And by harsh environments, our definition was any environment that is exposed to mechanical shocks, high temperature, high pressure, areas that are not normal conditions. And that's how the company was started, and that was the genesis of the company. And we actually had a lot of success not in the AEC industry at the beginning. Our beachhead market actually was completely a different industry. It was environmental remediation, which is kind of close to construction, but it's not that close. And that's how we actually validated the product. So you have that's the best thing for an entrepreneur is you have a customer who's ready to pay and is patient to see the product, the evolution of the product, and you basically test everything with them. So that's how we started. It was around 2017 or 18 exactly that we were doing business development. Myself and one of my co-founders, and I were figuring out, okay, what's the next step for at that time AOMS or Brickeye. And we did some interviews with the subject matter experts in the AEC industry, and we realized that the industry is looking into digital solutions. At that time, again, it was 6 years ago almost, and the industry was not as adoptive as today with respect to technology, specifically technology that has a combination of hardware and software. Project management tools and BIM was adopted at that time by big AEC industries, but technology like IoT was not as widespread as what we see today. So we realized that the industry is looking into ways to collect data, and everyone wants data, like what's my temperature in the site, what's my temperature of my concrete, what is the strength of my concrete, what's the flow of water, when is the leakage happening, and all these kind of things. And we realized that we have a very good foundation to build a platform that can collect all this data and then provide them as a tool to the project stakeholders in order for them to benefit from it. Mitigating risk is one part of it, but also improving productivity and efficiency. And then we had a very good growth in that market at the beginning with the concrete and then the foundations. And the COVID-19 happened, and everyone realized that it's not a good idea to have everyone at the site. And if we can collect data remotely, that would be a big advantage to keep the projects going. That was actually, I think, an educational moment for everyone, including entrepreneurs and companies. And we actually doubled down on our R&D and then to basically build what we call Brickeye Risk Mitigation, which is available today, to offer different types of solutions, as I mentioned at the beginning: foundations, water, concrete, foundations, water, and environmental risk.
What's the biggest challenge? This is all fascinating to me, but what's the biggest challenge on the job site when it comes to risk mitigation? You're collecting all this data, or maybe on the job site is not the right question. Just kind of searching for what the right question is. With your customers in risk mitigation, are they challenged by the idea of an Internet of Things based mitigation process or mitigation tool? It seems like you said earlier, the AEC industry is not the most tech forward industry. So have you come across much resistance to this idea of using Internet of Things, IoT, in risk mitigation?
That's actually a very, very good question. For any market, when you want to enter, there are barriers. So one thing that is important is that you actually provide a solution that solves the problem that your customer has. That's just a simple business 101 statement. So one of the issues that we actually faced at the beginning was that why I should use this technology, and is it robust enough? Can it tolerate that type of environment that I'm using it? How reliable this platform is? How I can get my underwriters or my engineer to sign off on use of the technology. I think that's what you see. I appreciate the fact that the industry at that time, they were not as digitized as they are today. However, the industry tries very hard. These days we see innovation teams in construction companies, and they educate the corporate internally and also spread that to all the divisions and the projects about the use of technology. So that's basically the barrier. And I think that to solve that problem, I think that's probably another topic and another probably conversation, is that how to break those barriers when you go to the industry with a new technology. You have to be careful as an entrepreneur. You have to do step-by-step pilots, learn from the pilots, correct the product, set the expectation with the customer, and go to the next stage. So that's how it works. I mean, that's at a very high level. Again, we can go to details if needed, but we saw resistance like any other technology adoption processes.
Is this, I mean, I assume you hope it is, you think it is, but is there a broader future to tools that use Internet of Things beyond risk mitigation, and how deep do you think this goes into the industry?
I think it will go very deep in this industry. I mean, if you look at IoT as a combination of hardware that collects data, sensors, sensor and data acquisition systems, cloud, analytics, and connectivity. These are all the four elements of an IoT system. So when you collect data, you can do a lot with that data. So risk mitigation is only a part of it. But if down the road, the data can be used for predicting the progress of the projects, predicting the shortfalls, the critical paths, like how we move more efficiently in a project. We hear all the time in the AEC industry that this project went over time, this project went over budget. Like how these data can help us to be more efficient in predicting, and more efficient, more accurate in predicting how things will go. And that's the power of data that we collect, and then you can, and then not just from one or two projects, actually across the board from multiple projects in different locations, and how like the power of AI really comes into this when you have enough data. I think that's going to be the future, and it's not just about sensors that are installed on their stationary in the sites. A robot can, or a drone that can fly in a construction site or move in a construction that collect all this data, overlay the data with BIM data, and then how we can basically create these digital models that can predict how this construction project is moving, and also how this will impact the operational side of the project. What's the maintenance schedule of this asset? It's either a building or a bridge or a road. If you want to keep it for 50 years or 100 years, how can the IoT help us to collect the data and be more efficient in maintaining these assets? So that's actually the future is bright. I mean, there are, I would say, tons of applications for IoT. IoT is just the basis of that, collect data, and then how we use the data is another aspect of it.
Yeah. Do you ironically have organizations that see a risk in the data collection? Does that make sense? Or you're collecting all this data. What are you going to do with this data? Can this data be used against me? Do you run into that?
Very, very good question. I think when data comes in, everyone is thinking about, okay, what is that data? So I think the topic of cybersecurity is a big topic, and all companies who actually operate in the AEC industry, they should adopt standard cybersecurity procedures and guidelines in order to be in compliance with the rules. But the other side of it, when we talk about the risk of data, we should understand like what type of data is being collected. So like an IoT system, specifically the platforms that we have, we don't collect personal data, we don't collect financial data. Like we don't collect those type of data that are more sensitive in terms of breaches and external like hacks. The data that we collect are sensor and telemetry data. Again, the question comes, someone may think, oh yeah, no one can do anything with the temperature data that comes from a concrete slab or a water leakage data. But at the end of the day, the data is the data. So you need to make sure that, because the owner of the data is the construction company, it comes from their assets or from their project, either the construction company or the developer or the owner of the project. So it's important to actually address that. And I think it's important to mention that how, as a company, you have procedures and standards in place to secure the data. and the information that has been collected. But again, that's actually an important thing. One other thing that we faced, I think a few times, and the fact that we don't use the IT. I mean, there's no IT setup in a construction site, like compared to when you sell your enterprise software into I think a 500 a Fortune 500 company. You have to directly deal with the IT team because they have to set it up for you, or it has to pass through their approval process. So about the construction industry is that, I mean, there's no IT infrastructure in a project. So we actually collect the data, we transmit it to the cloud, and we use reputable cellular network providers for transferring that data. There are rules and guidelines on where to store the data. I mean, if you're in the US, I mean, some contractors require the data is stored in the US. So we comply with that. So there are certain things that you can do as a company, and you should do, and to be in compliance. And so that's how we address the concern of data breach and data security.
You said something that I think brings up I think it's an interesting question. Maybe you don't, but the contractor or the developer, whoever the client is, they own the data. Is there a scenario where the tool is exponentially more powerful if everybody's data is combined? Right. So if I have 5 clients that are building high-rise buildings, and I'm collecting all of their data and using that as the basis of the tool, does that make it a more powerful, more accurate tool? I guess, data ownership aside, does this ever go in that direction?
Yeah, the answer to this question is yes. So if you have more data from different scenarios and different projects, then you can definitely build stronger tools. And that's what we probably see in other industries, like probably Google uses that all the time. To basically use the data to build stronger tools.
Mm-hmm.
But again, at the same time, one thing that is important in all these tools is that you need to make sure that your data is not you're not basically selling someone else's data. That's a no-go for any solution that's trying to do that. Second thing is that how you're using data to basically build the new tools. It's just the data is just for training the tool is fine. I mean, you're not basically using that data and then selling that data directly. You basically use that data to refine your prediction model. You use that data basically to tell your model it could become more accurate, because I came up with this scenario that, hey, my AI model, you don't really predict this very well. You need to improve your efficiency or your accuracy to like 95%. You're at 85%. So based on this data point, you can improve it. So I think that's basically what the reality of it, how the data is used to make better tools. Or the data is used to assess the connectivity, strength of connectivity in the site. So that's a simple example, because we face that all the time. Like how to make sure that you have a strong connectivity in a site, because the construction is a dynamic environment. Things change every day. And you have a cellular modem, you collect data from, or you get connected to a cell network through AT&T, for example. And all of a sudden a wall is built, and then you get no coverage or a low signal situation. So we use that data to tell AT&T and also to engage with our partners, hey, like, how can we improve this? How can we improve these sorts of scenarios? Because at the same time, the network providers are trying to expand the network, make the network more reliable, because they want everyone to be connected to that network. In the future, all these autonomous vehicles and all kinds of mission critical things will be through those networks. And I think that's the path for the whole world. So I think that's another way of using data for improving the efficiency of the platforms in general.
So when we think about the bigger picture, I guess, or back to the idea of risk mitigation specifically, and using IoT as the basis of it. What's the big takeaway here? What are Obviously you have clients, right? You have this product, you have clients that are using this. There's still a lot of them out there that are not. So what's the number one thing that someone needs to be thinking about or needs to consider if they're not using IoT, something like Brickeye, to mitigate their risk?
I think the first thing you need to think about is that like a read and read out case scenario. So what will be my exposure to risks? Different types of risk. It could be water risk, it could be foundation dam failure risk, or it could be environmental risk. What will be my exposure, and how much is going to cost me, and what will be my exposure if I have the IoT system implemented? So at the end of the day, it comes back to an insurance policy to have that you need to have. A lot of time when it comes to risk, and specifically about water, what we see in the industry is that the deductibles for water damage is increasing. So I have data from one of our partners that the deductible over the past 5 years has increased from like 25 to 50K to close to like 500K in some cases, 250K to 500K in some cases, like almost 10 times. And that's only for the first incident. And then when you have the second and third one, your deductible is going to be higher. So the insurance companies, they don't cover your entire loss. They only cover anything above that deductible. So you have to look at this risk mitigation as a tool that can help you with with the deductible. So first of all, you don't want to have a damage, although the insurance company will pay you, but that's what's going to stay with the history of that asset. That building is going to be transferred to a condo board, will be transferred to the owner. And if there is a history of a damage, I mean, then insurance companies are great in storing data and keeping record of data. So it's going to stay with that. And this will impact the future insurance policies for the asset, in this case, a building. The second thing is that you don't want to be out of pocket for expenses related to the deductibles. I think that's an important thing to consider. And it's just buying an insurance, but it's in a form of an IoT platform to help you mitigate that exposure that you have that is not technically covered by any insurance policy, like a builder wrap-up insurance policy, for example, in this case.
Yeah, to me, that brings up a really interesting question too. And this could go really broad really quickly, but is there a scenario where we realize these tools and capabilities are out there, and so suddenly now clients, insurance companies, et cetera, start requiring this? I guess once we get to the comfort that artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, et cetera, there's an acceptable level of accuracy and maybe an acceptable level of risk. But is there a scenario where it's not going to be a choice any longer? It's just going to be required by these other stakeholders in the ecosystem.
I think that's where the trend is going. To get there, obviously more data needs to be collected, and then the risk exposure need to be calculated on both scenarios, as I mentioned. So at some point, these things will be required because it becomes a part of I mean, in some cases in the AEC industry, we have design requirements. You need to follow certain procedures. I think at the insurance level, at the risk mitigation level, it's become an industry standard that you're required to have that. Otherwise, either we won't insure you or your premium will be very high. So considering the insurance industry as a data-driven industry and an industry that would like to reduce the loss and their exposure at the same time, they can force that at some point. But it takes time because more data needs to be collected, and then you really need to have a real scenario of how much do you expect to reduce the risk if system ABC is installed in this project.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think that's a really good way of identifying it, right? It's trending in that direction, but there's still some things we have to figure out. But it's all about the data, right? right?
Probably.
That's what it comes down to. This has been fascinating. So if you're out there listening and watching, before we went live, Hamid and I talked about the fact that this is not going to be a one-time appearance here on Shadow Shorts. There are a number of things that that we're going to talk about here. And I appreciate you coming on today and talking about risk mitigation via IoT. It's fascinating. And also a little bit of your journey, and when you come back, we'll get probably into a little more of your journey and how you're helping other startups and ventures through your own experience and your own knowledge and wisdom. So, Hamid Alemohammad, thank you very much for joining me today. This has been a fascinating conversation, as I said, and I also appreciate you being part of our mentor program with the Shadow Partners Incubator.
Thanks, Jeff, for the opportunity. And it was a pleasure meeting you and joining the Shadow Short. Look forward to more of these sessions.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to it as well. So thank you. If you're out there listening or watching, appreciate you consuming this with us. I hope you had some good takeaways from this conversation. Again, this has been Hamid Alemohammad. He is the co-founder and chief operating officer at Brickeye. And we've been talking about risk mitigation using IoT. I'll be back again tomorrow with another Shadow Shorts, and at some point in the near future, Hamid will be back to join me with another one of these conversations. So thanks for listening, and have a